The tickets felt flimsy in my hand, like a promise that could tear with the slightest pressure. I sat in the driver's seat of our minivan, the engine off, the silence inside the car a stark contrast to the low thrum of music leaking from the doors of the Maple Creek Amphitheater. Lights pulsed weakly against the foggy Washington night. On the passenger seat, my phone lay dark and quiet. It had been for the last 45 minutes. Leo's favorite band was about to go on, a small indie group he'd discovered online. And this was supposed to be a night for us, all three of us. I had tried. I had tried. I'd bought the tickets a month ago, cleared the calendar, and reminded Claire 3 times this week alone. Friday night, no meetings, just us, I had said. She'd smiled, a quick, distracted flash of teeth, and nodded. Of course, Ethan. I'm looking forward to it. A new message finally lit up my phone screen, and for a foolish second, my heart leaped. Maybe she was just outside, stuck in traffic, but I knew the truth before I even read the words. Claire, so sorry. Honey, a critical server issue came up. Can't get away. You and Leo have the best time for me. I'll make it up to you. I promise. The promise felt as thin as the paper tickets. I stared at the words, the sterile blue light of the screen making my eyes ache. I'll make it up to you. It was her mantra, the ghost of a guarantee that never materialized. I dropped the phone back onto the seat. The extra ticket stared up at me, a blank space where my wife was supposed to be. A familiar, hollow ache settled in my chest. It wasn't anger anymore. Anger requires energy, hope that things might change. This was just exhaustion, a quiet surrender. I took a deep breath, the damp, pine-scented air doing little to clear my head. Then I turned the key in the ignition, the engine rumbling to life as I prepared to go pick up our son. Alone. 2 weeks earlier, the first sound of the morning wasn't the alarm clock. It was the soft hum of the high-end espresso machine in our kitchen, a sound that meant Claire was already awake. By the time I walked downstairs at 6:30 a.m., she was a blur of efficient motion, dressed in a sharp blazer and dark pants. She moved between the counter and the front door, phone pressed to her ear, a sleek travel mug already in her hand. She was speaking in that crisp, professional tone she used for work, a language of deadlines and deliverables that felt alien in our quiet, suburban home. No, push the deployment to Monday. She was saying, I need all hands on deck for the queue for projection. She saw me, gave a small, tight smile, and mouthed good morning before turning her attention back to the call. That was our morning ritual. I was the keeper of the home front, the one who moved at a human pace. I started the coffee McCurth simple drip one for me and pulled out the bread for toast. Our son, Leo, shuffled in a few minutes later, a lanky 14-year-old tower of bedhead and teenage apathy. He grunted a hello and slumped into a chair at the kitchen island, scrolling through his phone. Morning, buddy, I said, placing a plate of toast in front of him. Got that history presentation today? Yeah, he mumbled, not looking up. It's whatever. You'll kill it. You know more about the Civil War than your teacher does. That got me a flicker of a smile. Probably. Claire ended her call and swooped in to kiss the top of Leo's head. It was a quick, fly-by gesture. Have a great day at school. Sweetie, be good. Okay, Mom, Leo said, his eyes still glued to the screen. She turned to me. I'll be late tonight. Dinner with the execs from the Seattle office. Okay, I said, my voice even. I didn't ask which night she wouldn't be late. There was no point. I was thinking of making that lasagna you like. Oh, don't worry about me. I'll grab something there. You and Leo enjoy it. She grabbed her briefcase, blew a kiss in my general direction, and then she was gone. The front door clicked shut, and the house seemed to exhale, settling back into its comfortable, quieter rhythm. It was just the two of us again. It was almost always just the two of us. I sat down across from Leo. So, I was listening to that band you like, The Wandering Echoes? His head snapped up. Interested for the first time all morning. Yeah. What did you think? They're good. Remind me a little of the stuff I used to listen to. The lead singer's got a great voice. Right. I told you. There's this one song. Amethyst Skies. You gotta hear it. He was already fumbling with his phone to play it for me. This was our language. Music. Soccer. Stupid internet memes. These were the threads that held our world together. I had been a stay-at-home dad since Leo was in kindergarten. It wasn't the original plan. I was a graphic designer, had a decent portfolio and a growing list of freelance clients. The plan was for me to go back to work once Leo was in school full-time. But then Claire was up for a big promotion, one that required more travel, longer hours. She asked me to stay home a little longer, just until things settled down. She'd said. She got the promotion, and then another one. Her hours increased, her responsibilities grew, and my little longer stretched into a decade. I didn't entirely mind. One loved being there for Leo. I was at every soccer game, every parent-teacher conference. I knew his friends, his favorite foods, his secret fears. I was the primary architect of his childhood. But somewhere along the way, I had lost pieces of myself. My design portfolio was gathering digital dust on an old hard drive. My professional network had all but vanished. My world had shrunk to the size of this house, this town, this one precious boy. As Leo played the song for me, his head nodding to the beat, an idea popped into his head. It was random, the way most teenage ideas are. You know what would be cool? He said, pausing the music. If I dyed my hair, like purple, like the song title. He was looking at me with a mixture of hope and mischief, expecting me to say no, to give him the standard parent line about school rules or looking professional. But looking at his face, so full of life and excitement, I couldn't bring myself to do it. Claire would have. She would have talked about college applications and first impressions. But she wasn't here. I smiled. Purple. Why not? Leo's eyes widened. Seriously, you'd let me? It's your hair, man. Besides, it would look awesome. I saw a genuine, unadulterated flash of joy on his face, and it felt like a victory. It was a simple yes, but in our house, a yes to anything spontaneous felt like a small act of rebellion. I'll even help you do it, though we might need to call in a professional. My artistic skills are a little rusty. My friend Mark could do it, I said, already thinking of my old buddy, a tattoo artist who knew his way around a bottle of hair dye. We could do it this weekend. This weekend? For real? Leo was practically vibrating with excitement. For real, I confirmed, feeling a warmth spread through my chest. This was what it was all about. These small moments, creating a memory out of a random Tuesday morning conversation. It was my job, my purpose. I just wished, for a fleeting moment, that it was a job I didn't always have to do alone. The rest of the week passed in its usual predictable pattern. I did the grocery shopping, the laundry, the yard work. I cooked dinners that Claire often missed and cleaned up a kitchen she barely used. We communicated mostly through text messages and notes left on the counter. Leo needs to be picked up from practice at 5. We're out of milk. Don't forget recycling is tomorrow. It was the language of logistics, of running a household, not a marriage. On Friday night, I picked Leo up from soccer practice. He was buzzing, not just from the game, but from the plan for the next day. So Mark is really coming over tomorrow? He asked as he threw his muddy cleats into the back of the minivan. Yep. He said he'll bring the good stuff. Professional grade purple. I said with a laugh. He's excited. Said it's been a while since he dyed anyone's hair a color not found in nature. Leo grinned, buckling his seatbelt. Is Mom gonna freak out? The question hung in the air for a moment. I thought about it. I hadn't told Claire. The thought had crossed my mind, but I pushed it away. Why? Because I knew exactly what the conversation would be. She'd be tired. She'd sigh and ask if it was really necessary. She'd bring up the potential downsides, the mess, the permanence. It would be a conversation about problems, not possibilities. It was easier to just not have it. Why waste my breath to have the same conversation on repeat? The one where my enthusiasm was met with her weary pragmatism. Your mom will be fine, I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. She'll see how happy it makes you, and she'll love it. It was a lie, and I think we both knew it. But in that moment, in the bubble of our car, driving through the quiet streets of Maple Creek, it felt better to believe it. It felt better to pretend we were just a normal family, making fun, spontaneous decisions, without having to run it through a committee of one overworked executive. The next day was perfect. The Pacific Northwest graced us with a rare burst of October sunshine, and we set up shop in the garage. Mark arrived with a bag full of bowls, brushes, and a tub of dye so vibrantly purple it almost glowed. He was my oldest friend, a guy I'd known since college. He had tattoos covering both arms and a laugh that could shake the walls, a stark contrast to the quiet, orderly life I now led. Seeing him always felt like a breath of fresh air from a world I used to belong to. We put on an old punk rock playlist, and the garage filled with the sounds of The Clash and the smell of chemical dye. I was officially demoted to the role of music supervisor and object fetcher while Mark, the true artist, meticulously sectioned off Leo's hair and painted on the purple goo. Leo was in heaven. He was laughing, telling Mark about his soccer team, asking about his tattoo shop. I leaned against the workbench, watching my son. He looked so happy, so completely at ease. His shoulders weren't hunched. His eyes weren't glued to his screen. He was present, alive, and soaking in the attention. My heart swelled with a fierce, protective love. This was a good day. This was a memory in the making, a bright, colorful snapshot in the scrapbook of his childhood. I took out my phone and snapped a picture of Leo, his head covered in foil, grinning like a fool. I sent it to Mark. I didn't send it to Claire. An hour later, after a thorough rinsing with the garden hose, the transformation was complete. Leo's dark brown hair was now a shocking, brilliant shade of electric purple. It was bold and loud and absolutely perfect. He stared at his reflection in the minivan's side mirror, his mouth hanging open in awe. "Oh," he breathed. "It's so purple. It's epic." "Dude," Mark said, clapping him on the shoulder. "Rocket." I couldn't stop smiling. "What do you think, buddy?" Leo finally turned away from the mirror and looked at me, his eyes shining. "I love it," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Thanks, Dad. Seriously, thank you." In that moment, any doubt I had vanished. The inevitable, awkward conversation with Claire, the potential fallout known if it mattered. Seeing that look on my son's face was worth it. It was worth everything. We spent the rest of the afternoon just hanging out, the three of us, like old times. We ordered pizza, and Mark told us stories about his most ridiculous clients. It felt easy, normal. For a few hours, our garage was a sanctuary from the quiet tension that usually filled our house. It was a pocket of time where we were just a dad, his son, and a good friend, making a memory that was loud and vibrant and unapologetically ours. I knew the silence would return when Claire got home, but for now, we were living in color. The high from the afternoon lingered long after Mark had gone. The garage was clean. The pizza boxes were in the recycling bin, but the vibrant energy remained, humming in the air. It was concentrated in the brilliant purple of Leo's hair, which seemed to defy the dimming evening light. We were sprawled on the living room couch, playing a mindless racing game on the console. Leo was laughing, his head tilted back, and the purple strands caught the light from the screen. For the first time in a long time, he looked completely, uncomplicatedly happy, and I had given that to him. The feeling was a warm, protective shield around my heart. The sound of the garage door rumbling open at 8 o'clock was the first crack in that shield. Leo's laughter instantly died in his throat. He sat up a little straighter, his hand unconsciously moving to touch his hair. The easy relaxation that had filled the room began to evaporate. replaced by a low-level hum of anxiety. I muted the TV. "Hey, it's okay," I said softly, giving him a reassuring look. "It's all good." He nodded, but his eyes were fixed on the door to the kitchen. We heard the familiar sounds of Claire's arrival, the clack of her heels on the hardwood floor, the heavy thud of her briefcase on the counter. A weary sigh. A few moments later, she appeared in the doorway to the living room. She looked exhausted. There were faint lines of stress around her eyes that her makeup couldn't hide, and her shoulders were slumped forward, as if carrying the weight of her entire office. Her gaze swept over the room, but it was a disconnected, unfocused look. It took her a full 10 seconds to truly register what she was seeing. Her eyes landed on Leo. They widened, just slightly. Her mouth parted, but no sound came out. She didn't gasp. She didn't yell. She just stared. It was an unnerving, clinical kind of stare, as if she were analyzing a piece of data that didn't fit the expected parameters. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. "Hi, Mom," Leo finally mumbled, his voice small. Claire blinked, as if snapping out of a trance. She forced a smile, but it was a brittle thing that didn't reach her eyes. "Hi, sweetie. Your hair is very bright. It's purple," he said, stating the obvious. "I can see that," she replied, her tone flat. She looked from Leo to me, and her expression was unreadable. It wasn't anger. Not yet. It was something else. A kind of quiet, deep-seated shock. She turned and walked back into the kitchen without another word. The shield around my heart was gone now, replaced by a familiar knot of dread in my stomach. Leo looked at me, his face a mixture of disappointment and worry. I gave him a weak thumbs up, but we both knew the piece was over. Dinner was a quiet affair. I'd saved a plate of lasagna for her, and I heated it up while she changed out of her work clothes. When she came back down, dressed in sweats and a faded university t-shirt, she looked less like a corporate executive and more like a ghost haunting our home. We sat at the dining table, the three of us, under the warm glow of the overhead light that suddenly felt like an interrogation lamp. I tried to bridge the silence. "So, how was the dinner with the execs?" "Fine," she said, pushing a piece of lasagna round her plate. "Long. Did you guys decide on the new cloud sensing protocol?" I asked, pulling a random piece of tech jargon from the air, one of the many I'd absorbed over years of one-sided conversations about her work. "It's complicated," she said, her eyes focused on her fork. The conversation died. The only sounds were the scraping of cutlery on ceramic. Leo ate quickly, his head down, the vibrant purple of his hair a defiant slash of color in the muted, tense atmosphere. He clearly wanted to be anywhere else. As soon as he finished, he mumbled an excuse about homework and practically fled upstairs. Now it was just the two of us. Claire still hadn't touched her food. She just sat there, staring at her plate. I waited. I knew it was coming. I'd been waiting for it since I saw her car pull into the driveway. Finally, she looked up at me. Her eyes were glassy, and her lower lip trembled. "Why, Ethan?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Why wouldn't you tell me?" I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. I tried to keep my voice calm, reasonable. It wasn't a big deal. Claire, he wanted to do it. It made him happy. Not a big deal. Her voice cracked. "He's our son. It's a decision about his appearance. A permanent or at least semi-permanentone. Don't I get a say? Don't I even get to be part of the conversation?" What would the conversation have been? I countered, the frustration I'd been suppressing all week starting to bubble up. "You would have been tired. You would have sighed and told me you didn't have the energy to discuss it. Or you would have listed all the reasons why it was a bad idea. We both know how it would have gone. You don't know that," she insisted, her voice rising. "You didn't give me the chance. You and Leo, you just went off and did this thing together. You and your friend. You created this big, fun memory, and you cut me out of it completely, like I don't even exist." The tears started to fall then, silent drops tracing paths down her cheeks. My first instinct, the old instinct, was to go to her, to comfort her. But I stayed put, because beneath the hurt in her voice, I heard an accusation that felt profoundly unfair. I was the one who was here. I was the one doing everything, making every memory, handling every crisis, big or small. Cut you out, I said, my voice dangerously low. Claire, you're never here to be cut out of anything. His soccer games, the little road trips to the coast, back to school shopping. You're always too busy with work, or too tired from work. I stopped having the conversations because I was tired of talking to myself. Why would I waste my breath? That's not fair, she cried, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand. I am doing this for us. This job. These hours sit so you can stay home. So Leo can have everything he needs. Do you think I enjoy living on conference calls and eating catered sandwiches for dinner? I am sacrificing for this family. We don't need the sacrifice. The words burst out of me, louder than I intended. We need you. Leo needs his mom. I need my wife. We don't need a bigger house or a newer car. We need you to be present in our lives. I took a breath, trying to regain control. Leo isn't even really comfortable with you anymore. Did you notice that? There's no I can't take you. Go ask your mom. He doesn't even bother. Now it's, I'm sorry I can't take you. Let me see if Mark is free that day. Your son asks me to call my friend before he even considers asking his own mother. How does that feel? That hit her. I saw it land, saw the flicker of pain in her eyes. She slumped in her chair, the fight seeming to drain out of her. She just shook her head, sobbing quietly into her hands. You don't understand, she whispered. I come home, and I see you too. You have your own world, your own jokes. I see the pictures you post, the things you do. You're making all of these memories without me. And that was it. That was the moment the years of resentment, the decade of being the secondary character in my own life, while also being the sole director of my son's, finally boiled over. The calm I had been desperately clinging to shattered into a million pieces. A cold, hard clarity washed over me. She wasn't seeing the reality of the situation. She was seeing a highlight reel and feeling sorry for herself for not being in it, completely ignoring the fact that she was the one who consistently refused the casting call. I looked at her, my crying wife, and I didn't feel a shred of pity. I just felt a profound, bottomless exhaustion. I asked her, my voice devoid of any warmth, any emotion at all. It was flat, clinical, and sharper than any shout. What did you expect me to do? Claire. She looked up, her tear-streaked face filled with confusion. If I waited for you to make memories with our son, I continued, each word a carefully placed stone, we wouldn't have any. We would be sitting in a dark room, 100% of the time. The effect was instantaneous. Her crying stopped as if a switch had been flipped. The color drained from her face. She stared at me, her eyes wide with a new kind of horror, as if she had never truly seen me before, as if I had just spoken in a foreign, monstrous language. The silence that fell over the room was absolute. It was heavier, colder, and more complete than any silence we had ever shared before. In that moment, I knew I had said something that could not be unsaid. Something had broken. She pushed her chair back, stood up on shaky legs, and walked out of the room without another word, leaving me alone at the table with the cold lasagna and the terrible, ringing echo of my own brutal truth. I stayed at the table for a long time after she left. The house was utterly still. I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the floorboards upstairs as Leo moved around in his room. Each sound was amplified in the vacuum Claire's departure had left behind. My words hung in the air, invisible but heavy, poisoning the space between us. We would be sitting in a dark room. It was the cruelest thing I had ever said to her, and also the most honest. The two were tangled together, a thorny knot in my gut. Eventually, the cold reality of routine pulled me to my feet. I gathered our plates, scraped the uneaten lasagna into the trash, and rinsed everything under hot water. I moved with a mechanical precision, my hands going through the motions my body had memorized over the last decade. Load the dishwasher, wipe the counters, sweep the floor. I was tidying the evidence of our broken evening, trying to restore order to a house whose foundations had just been fractured. But no amount of cleaning could scrub away the stain of what I had said, or the devastating silence that had followed. When I finally went upstairs, the light under her home office door was on. Not our bedroom, the office, her sanctuary, her fortress. The door was closed. It was a clear message. I paused outside it for a moment, my hand hovering near the doorknob. What would I even say? I'm sorry. It felt like a lie. I wasn't sorry I'd told the truth. I was just sorry for the pain it had caused. Or maybe I was just sorry for myself, for the mess I now had to live in. I let my hand drop and went to our bedroom alone. The king-sized bed felt absurdly large. A vast, empty expanse of cold sheets. I lay there for hours, staring at the ceiling, listening for the sound of her footsteps. But they never came. The next morning, the silence was a physical presence. It was the first thing I noticed when I woke up. The house was too quiet. The gentle hum of her espresso machine was missing. When I went downstairs, the kitchen was empty. A single, clean travel mug sat drying by the sink. She was already gone. She had left before Leo and I were even awake, slipping out of the house like a thief in the night. Leo came down a few minutes later, his purple hair a mess from sleep. He looked around the empty kitchen, his eyes asking the question he didn't want to voice. Mom had an early meeting, I said, my voice sounding unnaturally loud in the quiet. He just nodded, avoiding my gaze. He knew. Of course, he knew. He had probably heard the entire fight from his room. He ate his cereal in silence, the only sound the clinking of his spoon against the bowl. The easy chatter that usually filled our mornings was gone, replaced by a tense, fragile quiet. We were walking on eggshells around a bomb that had already gone off. The days that followed were a masterclass in avoidance. We became three separate satellites orbiting a common center, but never aligning. Claire came home late and went straight to her office. I'd leave a plate of food for her on the counter. And in the morning, I'd find the clean plate in the dishwasher. We communicated through a series of logistical necessities. I'd text her, Leo needs his soccer form signed. She'd text back, leave it on the counter. We were roommates, co-managers of a teenage dependent. The husband and wife had left the building. The silence was suffocating. It seeped into the walls, dampened every sound. The house, which I had once prided myself on making a warm and welcoming home, now felt like a museum, full of beautiful objects no one was allowed to touch or enjoy. Leo felt it most acutely. He became my shadow, sticking close to me, as if my presence could shield him from the Arctic chill that had descended upon our family. The distance between him and Claire, which had once been a matter of emotional inches, was now a chasm measured in miles. One afternoon, a few days after the fight, Claire actually got home at a reasonable hour. Leo and I were in the kitchen, trying to decipher the instructions for a new piece of furniture I'd bought for his room. He was holding the diagram, and I was holding a small wrench, both of us completely lost. Claire walked in, saw us, and hesitated in the doorway. "What are you two up to?" she asked, attempting a light, casual tone. "Building this," Leo said, not looking up from the paper. The instructions were apparently written by aliens. "Let me see," she said, stepping closer. "I'm good at these things." She reached for the instruction manual, but Leo instinctively pulled it back, clutching it to his chest. He looked at me, a flicker of panic in his eyes. It was a tiny, almost imperceptible gesture, but it was a rejection as clear as a slammed door. Claire's hand froze in midair. She saw it. Her smile faltered, and a shadow of hurt passed over her face. She let her hand drop to her side. "Oh, okay," she said, her voice small. "Well, let me know if you need help." She turned and retreated to her office. I watched her go, the knot in my stomach tightening. Leo avoided my eyes, suddenly intensely focused on a diagram of screws and bolts. "We should have let her help," I said quietly. "I've got it." He mumbled, his voice defensive. "It's not that hard." But it wasn't about the instructions. We both knew it. He was choosing a side. And in doing so, he was proving my terrible words right. He was uncomfortable with her. He didn't want her help. He didn't want her in our world. My brutal honesty had become a self-fulfilling prophecy. And watching it play out in real time was agonizing. The weekend arrived, bringing with it no relief. The silence just stretched to fill the extra space. On Saturday morning, I was cleaning out the hall closet, a task I'd been avoiding for months. I pulled out a dusty photo album from the back of the top shelf. I sat down on the floor, flipping through the plastic-covered pages. There we were, 10 years younger, Claire and I, standing in front of our first apartment, grinning like idiots. Me with a stupid goatee I thought was cool, her with long hair, her arm wrapped tightly around my waist. We looked happy. We looked like we were on the same team. I kept flipping. There was a picture of us bringing a tiny, bundled-up Leo home from the hospital. Claire was holding him, her face glowing with a kind of tired, radiant bliss I hadn't seen in years. I was looking at her, not the baby, with an expression of pure adoration. My fingers stopped on a photo from about 9 years ago. We were at a celebratory dinner. Claire had just gotten the promotion, the big one that had set us on our current path. I remembered that night so clearly. She had been electric, fizzing with ambition and excitement. The memory washed over me, so vivid it was almost painful. We were sitting in that fancy downtown restaurant, the one with the white tablecloths. She'd reached across the table and taken both of my hands in hers. "I couldn't have done this without you, Ethan," she'd said, her eyes shining, letting me focus. "Taking care of Leo and everything at home. You gave me the space to make this happen. You did the work, Claire," I'd said, beaming with pride for her. "You earned it. We earned it." She corrected me. "And this is just the beginning. It's the partner track. If I make it, we're set. You won't ever have to worry about chasing freelance gigs again. I can even scale back in a year or two. We'll have more time, more vacations. Just give me this. Help me get there." I remembered nodding, my heart full. It felt like we were building something together, a partnership. Her success was our success. Her sacrifice was temporary, a short-term investment for a long-term gain for the whole family. I believed her. I believed in us. A bitter laugh escaped my lips there in the hallway. A year or two. It had been 9, and the promotions just kept coming. And with each one, she moved further away from us, her promises fading like ink in the rain. The partnership had dissolved so gradually, I hadn't even noticed until I was the only one left on our side of the table. I closed the photo album, the plastic cover making a soft whoosh that sounded like a final exhale. The dust motes danced in the sliver of light coming from the hallway. I had helped her get there. She was there now, at the top of her professional world. And we were here, in this quiet house, sitting in a room that was getting darker by the day. I put the album back on the shelf, pushing it far into the back, behind the old board games and winter coats. Some memories were too heavy to keep out in the open. They were souvenirs from a country we no longer lived in. The past was a finished chapter, and I was starting to realize that if I wanted a different future, I couldn't keep waiting for my co-author to pick up a pen. I would have to start writing it myself. The decision to start writing my own future didn't come like a lightning bolt. It was more like the slow, dawning light of a Pacific Northwest morning, gray and gradual, until you finally realize the day has begun. It started with me opening my old laptop, the one I hadn't used for anything but paying bills and ordering groceries, for the better part of 5 years. It whirred to life with a protesting groan. And after several forgotten password attempts, I finally managed to log in. The desktop was a time capsule. Old photos of a much younger Leo, outdated software icons, and a folder simply labeled portfolio. My heart hammered against my ribs as I clicked it open. There it was, my old life, rendered in pixels and vectors. Logos I'd designed for local startups. Brochures for nonprofits. A sleek website layout for a brewery that had since gone out of business. I scrolled through the files, a strange mix of pride and melancholy washing over me. I had been good at this. I had a clean aesthetic, a sharp eye for typography, a knack for telling a story with images. It felt like looking at the work of a talented stranger, a person I used to know intimately, but had long since lost touch with. The file dates were a stark reminder of how much time had passed. 2014, 2015, nothing more recent. A decade of my creative life was just gone. A blank space. I spent the entire afternoon lost in that folder. I wasn't just looking at old designs. I was remembering the person I was when I made them. The guy who would stay up until 2 a.m., tweaking the kerning on a logo, fueled by cheap coffee and the sheer joy of creation. The guy who felt a jolt of electricity when a client loved his work. The guy who had an identity outside of being Leo's dad or Claire's husband. Where had that guy gone? He hadn't died. He'd just been put into hibernation. A new kind of energy started to buzz under my skin. It wasn't just about the resentment towards Claire anymore. This was about me. It was about reclaiming a piece of myself that I had voluntarily and foolishly let go dormant. I opened a new document. I started writing. I listed the skills I still had, the software I knew, the areas where I'd need to catch up. The world of graphic design had changed dramatically in 10 years. I was a dinosaur, but dinosaurs could learn new tricks. That evening, I called Mark. I needed to talk to someone who remembered the before me. Ethan, to what do I owe the honor? Don't tell me Leo wants to go neon green already, he said, his voice a cheerful boom over the phone. I laughed, a real, genuine laugh that felt rusty in my throat. Not yet. Hey, man, I have a weird question for you. Shoot, you still know people in the design world, right? Like freelance guys, small agencies? There was a pause on the other end of the line. Yeah, a few. Why? What's up? I'm thinking of maybe dipping a toe back in, I said, the words feeling foreign and ambitious on my tongue. Just to see what's out there. I was looking at my old portfolio today. It's ancient. Dude. Mark's voice was warm, encouraging. That's awesome. It's about damn time. Your old stuff was killer. You just need a refresh. He grew more serious. But Ethan, are you sure? What does Claire think about this? I haven't told her, I admitted, and the air of excitement around me instantly deflated, replaced by the cold weight of reality. It's complicated right now. Complicated how? The usual busy. Or is this about the purple hair incident? I sighed, leaning my head against the cool kitchen wall. The purple hair was just the spark. Man, the whole damn forest is on fire. I gave him the short, brutal version of the fight, ending with the horrible sentence I'd thrown at her. Mark was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was gentle. Oh, that's heavy. Man, that darkroom line, that's a tough one to come back from. Tell me about it. I muttered. The house feels like a morgue. Look, he said, his tone shifting from friend to advisor. Putting your portfolio together. That's a great idea. You need something for you. Seriously. It's been all about them for so long. But you gotta be careful. If things are this bad with Claire, her seeing you suddenly building an escape hatch might not go over well. She might see it as you giving up on her, not just starting something for you. He was right. I knew he was right. Every move I made now would be interpreted through the fractured lens of our conflict. Updating my portfolio wasn't just a personal project anymore. It was a statement. It was me. Quietly, secretly, building a lifeboat. I know, I said. For now, I'm just going to keep it to myself. Just work on it when I have time. See if I've even still got it. You've got it, Mark said with a certainty that I didn't feel myself. It's like riding a bike. A very complicated, aesthetically demanding bike. We talked for a little while longer, and by the time I hung up, the resolve had hardened in my chest. This was what I was going to do. For me, the next few weeks, I lived a double life. By day, I was the consummate stay-at-home dad. I made school lunches. I did the laundry. I cheered from the sidelines at Leo's soccer games. But at night, after Leo was in his room and the house was quiet, I'd retreat to my small corner of the basement. I'd fire up the old laptop and work. I subscribed to online tutorials, learning the new features of the design software I used to know like the back of my hand. I studied modern design trends, created mock projects for imaginary clients, and slowly, painstakingly, began to build a new portfolio. Each new design felt like a small act of defiance. It was a declaration that my creativity hadn't died. It had just been sleeping. With every hour I spent working, I felt a little bit of the old Ethan seeping back into my bones. The resentment I felt towards Claire didn't disappear, but it was no longer the only thing fueling me. I had a new focus, a secret project that was entirely my own. Claire and I continued our Cold War of silence. We were polite, distant strangers. We'd have brief, functional conversations about household logistics. The dishwasher is making a weird noise. Leo's parent-teacher conference is on the 15th. There was no warmth, no intimacy. She never asked what I did with my evenings, and I never offered the information. I think, in a way, we were both grateful for the distance. It was less painful than trying and failing to connect. One evening, I got an email notification. It was from a small, local marketing agency in a town about 30 minutes away. Thank you for your submission. We are impressed with your portfolio and would like to schedule a brief introductory call. My breath caught in my throat. I had, on a whim, sent out a few applications for freelance, remote contract work. I hadn't expected to hear back. I hadn't even let myself hope. But here it was, a flicker of interest, a sign that the ghost of my former self wasn't just a figment of my imagination. A wide, uncontrollable grin spread across my face. I wanted to tell someone. I wanted to run upstairs and show Leo. I even had a fleeting, insane urge to show Claire, to say, "See, I'm still that guy you fell in love with. I'm still creative and talented." But I quickly smothered the impulse. This was my secret, my lifeboat. Sharing it now would feel like putting it on display before it was even seaworthy. It was too new, too fragile. So I just sat there in the dim light of the basement, the glow of the laptop screen illuminating my face, and I allowed myself a single, quiet moment of victory. It was the first truly hopeful moment I'd had in a very long time. It was a whisper that maybe, just maybe, there was a way out of the dark room after all. The introductory call was scheduled for a Tuesday morning, right after I dropped Leo off at school. I spent the hour beforehand pacing the kitchen, my stomach churning with a nervous energy I hadn't felt in 15 years. It was the kind of anxiety that is tangled up with excitement, a feeling of being on the precipice of something new. I changed my shirt 3 times, finally settling on a simple button-down. Even though it was just a phone call, it felt important to look the part, even if no one could see me. The call itself was surprisingly easy. I spoke with a woman named Sarah, the agency's creative director. She was sharp, friendly, and refreshingly direct. She liked my portfolio new, updated and was looking for a reliable freelance designer for some overflow work. It wouldn't be glamorous stuff, mostly small-scale web banners and social media graphics for local businesses. But it was real. It was a paid gig. It was a foot back in the door. The pay isn't huge for contract work, she said, her voice matter of fact, but if it goes well, we have a steady stream of these kinds of projects. That sounds great, I said, trying to keep my voice from cracking with relief. I'm looking to rebuild my client base, so consistency is perfect. By the end of the 30-minute call, she had offered me my first project, a set of digital ads for a local garden center. It was a small, 4-hour job, but to me, it felt monumental. I hung up the phone, a wide, disbelieving smile on my face. I had a client. I was officially a working graphic designer again. The secret nature of my new endeavor forced me to operate with a kind of clandestine precision. I worked during the day. In the hours between dropping Leo off at school and picking him up from practice, the house was my office. The quiet, which had once felt oppressive and lonely, was now a productive sanctuary. I'd put on my headphones, listen to the same albums I had in my 20s, and lose myself in the satisfying geometry of design software. For the first time in a decade, I had a purpose that wasn't directly tied to my son or my wife. It was mine. The feeling was intoxicating. I finished the garden center ads in a little over 3 hours, my old skills coming back to me like a familiar song. I emailed the files to Sarah and felt a jolt of professional pride that I had completely forgotten existed. That evening, the dynamic in the house was the same, yet I felt different. Claire came home late, looking stressed. We had our usual brief, transactional exchange about dinner and Leo's schedule, but her weary sighs and the tense set of her jaw didn't burrow under my skin the way they usually did. The resentment was still there, a low hum in the background, but it was no longer the dominant frequency. I had my own world now, my own small victory simmering inside me. It was a buffer, a shield. Her exhaustion was hers. My newfound energy was mine. A few days later, Sarah emailed me back. The client loved the ads, and she had another, slightly bigger project for me if I was interested. I was. This became my new normal. I was a secret agent of my own life. I juggled school runs and grocery shopping with color palettes and font choices. I took client calls in the car after dropping Leo at the library. My old laptop in the basement became the command center for my quiet rebellion. And with each completed project, with each positive email from Sarah, a little bit of the old Ethan came back to life. I felt sharper, more engaged, more like the person I was supposed to be. The change in me didn't go unnoticed. "You seem happier," Leo commented one afternoon as I was driving him home from soccer practice. He was staring at me from the passenger seat, his head cocked to the side, a curious expression on his face. "Do I?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Yeah, like, you're smiling more, and you're not sighing all the time." The observation hit me with surprising force. I hadn't even realized I'd been sighing all the time. But of course I had. It was the sound of my own resignation. "Well, your team is finally on a winning streak." I deflected. "That's enough to make any dad happy." He seemed to accept the answer, turning to look out the window. But the seed was planted. He could sense a shift in the emotional atmosphere, at least on my side of the equation. The inevitable moment of discovery came on a rainy Saturday in late November. Leo had a big soccer tournament, the kind that lasts all day. It was cold and miserable, the rain coming down in a relentless, bone-chilling drizzle. It was the kind of day that tested the dedication of even the most hardcore soccer parent. Claire had a major deadline at work. "I can't make it, Ethan," she had said the night before, her voice laced with what sounded like genuine regret. "I am so swamped. I'll be in the office all day. Tell Leo I'm cheering for him." I just nodded. I didn't say, "He'd rather you were there than cheering from your desk." There was no point. So, I spent the day on the sidelines, huddled under a large umbrella, a thermos of hot coffee my only companion. Leo's team played well. They won their first game, tied their second. In the third and final game of the round robin, disaster struck. Leo was chasing down a loose ball near the sideline when his feet got tangled with another player's. He went down hard. I was on my feet before he even hit the ground. He didn't get up. He just lay on the wet turf, clutching his ankle, his face contorted in pain. The coach and the trainer ran onto the field. I ran right behind them, my heart pounding in my chest. His ankle was already starting to swell. It was a bad sprain, maybe worse. The trainer carefully helped him up, and Leo leaned on us, unable to put any weight on his foot. The game stopped. The parents on the sideline were murmuring with concern. All I could see was the pain on my son's face. As we were helping him off the field, his whole body shaking from a combination of pain and cold. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with fear. "Dad," he choked out, his voice trembling. "It hurts. It really hurts." My first instinct was to call Claire, to tell her what happened, to have my partner there with me in a crisis. I pulled out my phone, and then I stopped. What would she do? She was in the middle of a critical deadline, an hour away in Seattle. She would panic. She would feel guilty. She would be torn. Her presence would add stress, not comfort. I put the phone back in my pocket. "I know it does, buddy," I said, my voice as calm and steady as I could make it. "We're going to get you taken care of. Let's get you to the car, and then we'll go straight to urgent care." I carried him to the minivan, got him settled in the passenger seat with his leg propped up, and wrapped him in every dry blanket I could find. As I drove, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Claire. "Claire, how's the game going? Hope you guys aren't too soaked." I glanced at Leo. He was pale, his eyes closed, his breathing shallow. I pulled over to the side of the road and typed a quick reply. "Ethan, game's done. Heading home now. It's pretty wet out here." I didn't tell her. In that moment, it felt like a mercy to her, so she could focus on her work without the added weight of guilt, and a mercy to me, because I didn't have the energy to manage her reaction on top of managing my son's pain. It was just easier to handle it myself. It was what I always did. We spent the next 3 hours at urgent care. It was a sprain, a bad one, but luckily not broken. They fitted him with a brace and gave us a pair of crutches. By the time we got home, it was dark. The house was empty and quiet. Claire still wasn't back. I got Leo settled on the couch, his leg elevated on a mountain of pillows. I made him soup and put on his favorite movie. He was exhausted and quiet, the adrenaline having worn off, leaving only the dull, throbbing pain. Claire finally came home around 9. She walked in, saw Leo on the couch with his leg propped up, the crutches leaning against the coffee table, and she froze. "What happened?" she asked, her voice sharp with alarm. "I hurt my ankle," Leo said quietly. "He sprained it," I added, my tone neutral. "In the last game. We just got back from urgent care a few hours ago." Claire stared at us, her face a canvas of conflicting emotions: shock, concern, and a dawning, terrible realization. "Urgent care. Why didn't you call me?" "You were busy," I said simply. "There was nothing you could have done." "I handled it." "Handled it?" she repeated, her voice rising. "Ethan, our son was hurt. He was at the doctor, and you didn't think to tell me?" "Mom, it's fine," Leo mumbled, clearly uncomfortable. Dad was there. His words, meant to be reassuring, were like gasoline on a fire. Claire's gaze snapped to me, and her eyes were filled with a raw, profound hurt that went beyond anger. "Of course Dad was there," she said, her voice dripping with a bitterness that stunned me. "When is he not? I am his mother. I had a right to know. I had a right to be there. I made a judgment call." "Claire," I said, standing up to face her, "I decided not to derail your entire day and send you into a panic over something that was already under control." "Under your control," she shot back. "That's the point, isn't it? It's always under your control. You are the parent, and I'm just the person who funds the operation. You don't just cut me out of the fun memories anymore. Ethan, you cut me out of the hard ones, too. You cut me out of being a mother." She stood there, her briefcase still in her hand, her work clothes looking rumpled and out of place in the middle of our family crisis. And in that moment, she looked utterly and completely like a stranger who didn't understand that I hadn't cut her out. She had, through 1,000 tiny choices, cut herself out. I was just the one who had finally stopped trying to draw her back in. The chasm between us had never felt wider, or more impossible to cross. The argument that night was different from the one about Leo's hair. The first fight had been explosive, a sudden eruption of long-buried resentments. This one was a low, grinding earthquake. shaking the already cracked foundations of our marriage. There was less shouting and more quiet. Venomous accusations. "You enjoy this, don't you?" she said, her voice trembling with a quiet rage after Leo had hobbled up to his room to escape the toxic atmosphere. "You enjoy being the hero, the one who is always there, the indispensable parent. It makes you feel powerful. It justifies everything." "Justifies what?" I shot back, my own anger flaring. "Justifies the fact that I've put my entire life on hold for a decade? That I'm the default for everything, from a scraped knee to a major injury, because you've made it clear that your time is more valuable than ours? I don't enjoy it, Claire. I do it because it has to be done, and you are never here to do it." "I am here," she insisted, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "I am in this house. I work 60 hours a week so that this house can exist, so that Leo can play on a competitive soccer team that costs a fortune, so that you don't have to worry about a single bill. And you think that's all it is?" I asked, my voice incredulous. "You think being a parent is just a financial transaction? That you can just wire in the funds for a childhood and call it a day? Leo doesn't need your money, Claire. He needs you. He needed his mom today. He was scared and in pain, and he needed his mom. But she was in a meeting, so he had to settle for just me." Again, her face crumpled. The anger seemed to dissolve, leaving behind a raw, painful vulnerability. "I didn't know," she whispered, shaking her head. "You didn't give me the chance to be there. You took that choice away from me. That choice was made a long time ago," I said, the exhaustion returning, washing over me like a cold tide. "It was made every time you chose a late-night meeting over dinner with us, every time you answered an email during a movie night, every time you promised you'd make it up to us and then didn't. You can't just opt in when there's a crisis, Claire. Parenthood is the whole damn job, not just the parts that fit conveniently into your schedule." I didn't have the energy to fight anymore. I turned and walked away, heading down to the basement. I needed to be in my space, my one corner of the world that she hadn't touched, that wasn't contaminated by our shared history of disappointment. I sat in front of my laptop, but I didn't open any design files. I just stared at the blank screen, the silence of the basement a welcome relief. My words echoed in my head. You can't just opt in when there's a crisis. And yet, in not calling her, hadn't I done exactly what I accused her of? I had reinforced the wall between her and her son. I had confirmed her status as an outsider. The thought was unsettling. My justification that I was protecting her from guilt and myself from her drama suddenly felt thin. Selfish. Maybe she was right. Maybe a part of me did enjoy being the sole proprietor of our son's life. It was a lonely, exhausting job, but it was mine. It gave me a sense of purpose, a sense of indispensability that my dormant career never could. The next few days were the worst yet. Leo was home from school, his sprained ankle propped up on the couch. He was bored, frustrated, and in pain. I was his full-time nurse, entertainment director, and short-order cook. Claire, in turn, seemed to be actively avoiding the house. She left before we woke up and came home long after Leo was asleep. It was as if the sight of her injured son, a living testament to her absence, was too much for her to bear. She'd text me during the day. "How is he feeling? Does he need anything?" My replies were short and to the point. "He's fine. We have everything we need." We were communicating like divorced parents, politely coordinating the care of our child from a distance. The emotional intimacy of our marriage was not just gone. It felt like it had never existed. It was during this period, trapped in the house with a convalescing teenager, that I found myself retreating further and further into my secret work. It was my only escape. I'd set Leo up with a movie and a snack, then slip down to the basement for an hour or two. I finished another project for Sarah's agency, and she immediately sent me a new one, this time with a higher rate. My little freelance gig was becoming a steady, reliable stream of income, not enough to support a family, but enough to feel real. It was my money. I opened a separate bank account, A small act of financial independence that felt both liberating and treacherous. One afternoon, Leo was napping on the couch. The house was quiet. I was in the basement, deeply focused on designing a logo for a new client, a local coffee shop. I had my headphones on, listening to an old playlist, completely lost in the creative flow. I was tweaking the curves of a stylized coffee bean, moving it by a single pixel at a time. It was meditative, absorbing work. I didn't hear her come home early. I didn't hear her footsteps on the stairs. The first I knew of her presence was when a shadow fell over my laptop screen. I jumped, startled, and pulled off my headphones. Claire was standing right behind me, her arms crossed, a strange expression on her face. She was looking at my screen, at the intricate design software, at the logo taking shape. "What is this?" she asked, her voice quiet, neutral. My mind raced. My secret was out. My heart was hammering against my ribs. "It's just a personal project," I stammered, my face flushing with heat. "Just messing around with some old software." She didn't look at me. Her eyes were still glued to the screen. She was a project manager. She could recognize real work when she saw it. This wasn't messing around. The file names, the organized layers, the professional interfacet was all evidence. "A personal project," she repeated, her tone flat. She pointed to the corner of the screen, where the client's brief was minimized. "Who is the daily grind?" I had nowhere to hide. The lie was flimsy and pathetic. I sighed, the air leaving my lungs in a rush of defeat. "It's a freelance job," I said quietly. She finally looked at me. Her expression wasn't angry. It was something far more complex. It was a look of dawning, devastating comprehension. It was as if she were a detective who had just found the final, crucial clue, and the full picture of the crime was now horrifically clear in her mind. "Freelance," she said, the word tasting like ash in her mouth. "You're working." "Just a little bit," I said, my voice defensive. "Here and there. It's not a big deal." "Not a big deal?" she echoed, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "You're down here, in the basement, building a new life for yourself. You have been for weeks, haven't you? While you were telling me I was the one who was absent, while you were accusing me of not being a part of this family, you were planning your escape." "It's not an escape," I insisted, standing up to face her. "It's something for me, something that isn't about being a dad or a husband, something that I used to be." "Is that so wrong?" "No," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. She looked around the small, cramped basement space, at my old laptop, at the notepad filled with sketches. She looked so lost. "It's not wrong, Ethan. It's just secret." Why was it a secret? The question hung in the air between us. Why? I didn't have a simple answer. Because I was afraid? Because I knew she would see it as a threat? Because it was the one thing that was truly mine, and I didn't want her to have any part of it? Because admitting I needed more than the life we had felt like a betrayal of the promise I'd made all those years ago? "I don't know," I said, and it was the honest truth. She just nodded slowly, as if accepting a verdict she had long been dreading. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a profound, quiet sadness. It wasn't the look of a wife who had caught her husband in a lie. It was the look of someone who had just realized she was completely and utterly alone, even in a house full of people. She had been so busy building her career, she hadn't noticed that her husband had been busy building a wall. And now, standing in the basement, she had finally run right into it. She turned without another word and walked back up the stairs, leaving me in the silent company of my secret, which was now no longer a source of pride, but a symbol of our final, irreparable divide. The discovery of my freelance work wasn't the catalyst for another fight. It was worse. It was the catalyst for a quiet, formal surrender. The Cold War was over, not because a peace treaty had been signed, but because one side had simply stopped showing up to the battlefield. Claire retreated so far into herself that she became a ghost in her own home. The polite, functional text stopped. The brief exchanges in the kitchen ceased. We moved around each other with the careful, deliberate choreography of strangers who happened to share a mortgage. She saw my work not as an act of self-preservation, but as the ultimate act of betrayal. To her, it confirmed everything. I wasn't just the gatekeeper of our son's affection. I was actively building a world that didn't include her. My secret project, my lifeboat, was proof that I had given up on us long before the fight about Leo's hair. In her eyes, I had been the one who was absent all along, emotionally checking out while physically present. The weight of this new silence was heavier than before. It was no longer angry or tense. It was hollow. It was the silence of a tomb. I continued my freelance work, but the joy was gone. The sense of victory I'd felt was replaced by a gnawing guilt. Every email from a client, every payment that landed in my secret bank account, felt like another brick in the wall I was building between us. Leo, stuck between two silent, grieving adults, became increasingly withdrawn. The crutches were gone. His ankle was healing, but a different kind of injury had taken its place. He spent most of his time in his room, headphones on, blocking out the suffocating quiet of the house. The easy laughter he and I once shared became a rare and precious commodity. Our home, once a sanctuary, had become a place we all wanted to escape. The breaking point, for Claire, came from an unlikely source, a corporate email. It was a mass email, sent to all senior-level employees at her company, announcing the annual list of promotions to partner. It was the list she had been working towards for a decade. It was the reason I was a stay-at-home dad. It was the finish line she had asked me to help her cross all those years ago. Her name wasn't on it. I didn't know this at first. I just knew that she came home on a Thursday night at a time she never did, 6 p.m. I was in the kitchen, listlessly stirring a pot of chili. When she walked in, she wasn't carrying her briefcase. Her face was pale and stripped of all makeup, making her look younger and impossibly fragile. She walked to the kitchen island and sat down on one of the stools, her posture unnaturally still. "Hey," I said, my voice cautious. "You're home early." She didn't answer. She just stared at the polished granite countertop as if trying to decipher a hidden message. In its swirls of gray and black, "Claire, is everything okay?" She finally looked up at me, and her eyes were empty. It was a look I'd never seen on her before. Not anger, not sadness, just a profound, cavernous emptiness. "The partner list came out today," she said, her voice a flat monotone. "I didn't make it." I stopped stirring. The spoon clattered against the side of the pot. I didn't know what to say. For 10 years, this promotion had been the unspoken third party in our marriage. It was the reason for the late nights, the missed dinners, the absent parent. It was the justification for all of our sacrifices, or rather, all of my sacrifices and her efforts. And now, it was gone. The entire premise of our life for the last decade had just been invalidated by a corporate email. "Claire, I'm so sorry," I said, and the words felt inadequate, pathetic. A single, harsh laugh escaped her lips. It was a sound completely devoid of humor. "Are you?" she asked, her empty gaze pinning me to the spot. "Are you really? Or are you thrilled? This must be perfect for you. The great corporate machine that stole your wife away has finally chewed her up and spit her out. Now she can come home and be the dutiful little wife you always wanted." "That's not what I wanted," I said, my voice low. "I just wanted you." "Did you?" She shot back, a flicker of the old fire returning to her eyes. "Or did you just want me to fail? You quit on us, Ethan. You quit a long time ago. You started building your own life down in that basement because you were betting on me to fail. And you won." "That's not true," I insisted, stepping away from the stove. Towards her. "My work has nothing to do with you and your job. It has to do with me, with the fact that I disappeared. I lost myself. We all lost ourselves." Her voice cracked, and the emptiness in her eyes was finally filled with tears. They welled up and spilled over, tracing paths down her pale cheeks. "You think I haven't? I've spent 10 years of my life chasing a ghost. I sacrificed everything. I missed my son's childhood. I pushed away my husband. For what? For a stupid title? I look in the mirror, and I don't know who I am anymore. I'm not a partner at my firm. I'm not a mother to my son. And I'm not a wife to you. I'm nothing. I have nothing. She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with deep, ragged sobs. All the walls she had built, all the corporate armor she wore, it all just disintegrated in that moment, leaving behind the broken, terrified woman underneath. My anger, my resentment, all the justifications I had built up for myself, they melted away. I didn't see the workaholic who had neglected her family. I saw my wife. I saw the woman I had fallen in love with, drowning in a sea of her own making. And I saw how I had stood on the shore, watching, without throwing her a rope. I walked around the island and did something I hadn't done in months. I put my arms around her. At first, she stiffened, her body rigid with surprise. But then, she collapsed against me, her hands clutching the front of my shirt as if she were a drowning woman, and I was the only solid thing in the world. She cried into my chest, long, painful sobs of failure and loss and regret, and I just held her, my own tears blurring my vision, my cheek resting on the top of her head. We stood like that for a long time, the forgotten chili simmering on the stove. The silence of the house finally filled with something other than anger, a shared, profound grief for the life we had lost, for the people we had become. Later that evening, long after Leo was asleep, we sat at the dining room table, the same table where our marriage had first fractured. But this time, there were no accusations, just a quiet, exhausted honesty. My boss told me why I didn't make partner. She said, her voice hoarse from crying. He said my focus had been slipping, that I seemed distracted, disengaged. She looked at me, a flicker of bitter irony in her eyes. All those years I gave them my complete, undivided attention. And in the last few months, when I was so torn up about us, that's what they noticed. That's what cost me everything. It didn't cost you everything, I said softly. It just cost you a job. It was more than a job, she whispered. It was my identity. It was the only thing I thought I was good at. You were good at it, I said. Too good. You were so good at it. You forgot how to be good at this. I gestured around the quiet, dark room. At our home. She nodded, staring down at her hands. I know, Ethan, I am so sorry. For all of it. For the missed games. For the empty promises. For making you feel like you were doing this all alone. I was so scared. I was terrified of failing at work. But I was even more terrified that I had already failed as a mother. So I just ran away. I ran to the one place where I knew the rules, where I felt competent. I ran away too, I admitted, the confession feeling like a weight lifting from my chest. I went down to the basement. I stopped talking to you. I stopped trying. I was so angry, so resentful. I wanted to punish you. And I did. We both did. And the only person who really got hurt was Leo. The name of our son hung in the air between us, a testament to our mutual failure. We had been so caught up in our own pain that we hadn't seen how deeply we were wounding him. There were no easy answers that night, no magical solutions. The damage of a decade couldn't be undone in a single conversation. But for the first time in a very long time, we were looking at the wreckage together, from the same side. We weren't husband versus wife anymore. We were just a broken people, sitting in the ruins of a life we had built and then systematically dismantled. The house was still dark, but for the first time, we were sitting in it together. And that, I realized, was a start. It was the first, faint glimmer of a light I thought had been extinguished forever. The morning after felt like waking up after a storm. The air was clean. The tension that had been crackling in our house for months had finally broken. It wasn't gone, but it had changed. The silence was no longer a weapon. It was a space for contemplation. Claire took the day off work. It was the first unplanned personal day she had taken since I could remember. She didn't retreat to her office. Instead, she sat at the kitchen island with a cup of tea, watching me make pancakes. a Saturday morning ritual she had almost always missed. Leo came downstairs, saw her there, and hesitated. His eyes darted from her to me, trying to read the new emotional landscape. "Morning, sweetie," Claire said, her voice soft. It lacked the usual forced brightness. It was just quiet. "Pancakes." Sure," he mumbled, cautiously taking a seat a few stools away from her. We ate in a quiet that was awkward but not hostile. It was the careful quiet of people learning to be in the same room again. After a few minutes, Claire spoke, her eyes on her son. "Leo," she began, her voice a little unsteady. I owe you an apology. For a lot of things. For not being around. For missing your games. For not being the mom you deserved." Leo stopped eating, his fork hovering over his plate. He looked uncomfortable, unused to this kind of direct emotional honesty from her. He just shrugged, looking down at his food. "It's okay." "No," Claire insisted gently. "It's not okay. I let my work become more important than my family, and that wasn't fair to you or your dad. I'm going to try to do better. I promise." It wasn't a grand, dramatic speech. It was simple, quiet, and profoundly sincere. Leo looked up, and for the first time, he really looked at her. He saw the genuine remorse in her eyes, the exhaustion etched on her face. He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't absolution. But it was a crack in the wall. It was an acknowledgement. That small moment was the beginning. Change didn't happen overnight. It was a slow, painstaking process of unlearning a decade of bad habits. It was Claire, deliberately leaving her work laptop in her office at the end of the day. It was her asking me, "How was your day?" and actually listening to the answer. It was her making an effort to learn the names of Leo's friends, to ask about the music he was listening to. It was awkward. She was clumsy at it. Years of communicating in corporate speak had made her rusty at the simple language of family. There were times she'd try to connect with Leo, and he would shut her down. His teenage defenses still firmly in place. I'd see the flash of hurt in her eyes. But to her credit, she didn't retreat. She would take a breath, give him his space, and try again later. She was finally doing the work, and I had to do my own work, too. I had to learn to let her in. I had to fight the instinct to handle everything myself. When Leo needed a ride, I'd say, "Go ask your mom if she's free." I had to actively create opportunities for them to connect, to rebuild the bridge I had. In my anger, help demolish. I moved my laptop out of the basement and set up a small desk in a corner of the living room. My work was no longer a secret, but a part of our shared life. Claire would sometimes look over my shoulder and ask about a design, showing a genuine interest I never thought possible. "That's a really nice color palette," she commented one afternoon, pointing to my screen. "Warm, but still professional." "Thanks," I said, surprised. "It's for the coffee shop, the daily grind, the one downtown. I love that place," she said. "When you're done, we should all go. Your treat. Obviously, you're the big shot designer now." She smiled, a small, genuine smile, and I smiled back. We started talking about the future, not as a collection of individual plans, but as a shared path. Her failure to make partner, which had felt like the end of the world, was slowly revealing itself to be a gift. It had freed her from the relentless climb. She had started looking for other jobs, roles at smaller companies that promised a better work-life balance, even if it meant a smaller paycheck and a less prestigious title. "It's funny," she said one night as we were cleaning up the kitchen together. "For years, I thought I was working so hard to give us financial security, but we already had it. We were just too busy and too miserable to enjoy it. All I did was trade our time for money we didn't even need. We can get the time back," I said. "It's not too late." The real test came a few weeks later. It was the evening of Leo's end-of-season soccer awards banquet. It was a simple affair held in the high school cafeteria. In previous years, I would have gone alone. This year, Claire blocked it off on her calendar a month in advance. We sat together at a long, crowded table, surrounded by other families. When Leo's name was called for the Most Improved Player award, he walked up to the front to receive his small trophy. He mumbled a thank you into the microphone and then walked back, his eyes scanning the crowd. He looked right at our table. He saw me, clapping and cheering, and right next to me, he saw his mother, her face beaming with a proud, unguarded smile, her phone up, taking a slightly blurry picture. Leo looked at her, and a slow, genuine smile spread across his own face, a real one, the kind I hadn't seen him give her in years. On the drive home, the car was quiet, but it was a comfortable, shared silence. Leo sat in the back, turning his trophy over and over in his hands. "Hey," Claire said, turning around in the passenger seat to look at him. "How about we go out for a celebratory breakfast tomorrow morning? Your choice. Even that place with the crazy expensive waffles?" he asked, a hint of playful challenge in his voice. "Especially that place," she said with a laugh. "My treat." I looked over at her profile illuminated by the passing streetlights. The lines of stress around her eyes seemed to have softened. She looked tired, but it was a good kind of tired. The tiredness that comes from a day well spent, not a day endured. She caught my eye and smiled, a quiet, knowing smile that was just for me. I reached over and took her hand, our fingers lacing together over the center console. Her hand was warm in mine. It felt familiar. It felt like coming home. We still had a long way to go. There were scars that wouldn't fade, and habits that would be hard to break completely. Our story wasn't a fairy tale with a perfectly happy ending. But sitting there, driving through the quiet streets of our town, with my son in the back seat and my wife's hand in mine, I knew we were no longer just three people living in the same house. We were a family again, sitting together, not in a dark room, but in a space filled with the quiet, hopeful, and beautifully imperfect light of a second chance. And this time, we were all creating the memory together.